They fined me $250 for planting roses around my son's memorial bench. The bench I'd placed in my own front yard to honor the boy I buried 3 years ago. Karen, our HOA vice president, said it violated landscape uniformity standards. But what she didn't know when she took a sledgehammer to that bench one Tuesday morning was that I'd spent 2 months documenting every single violation of her own property. And those violations were about to cost her the house she'd lived in for 12 years. My name's Ellen. I'm 62, a retired elementary school teacher, and I've lived in Meadowbrook HOA community for 8 years. It's one of those planned neighborhoods with neat lawns, identical mailboxes, and rules about everything from fence height to what day you can put out trash. I moved here after my husband passed, looking for a quiet place to restart. For the first 5 years, it was perfect. Friendly neighbors, weekend barbecues, the kind of community where people actually waved at each other. Then my son, Michael, died in a car accident. He was 28. The grief nearly destroyed me. 6 months after his funeral, I wanted to do something to honor him. Michael loved woodworking, so I commissioned a beautiful oak bench with a small brass plaque, in memory of Michael Chen. He loved watching sunrises. I placed it in my front yard, under the maple tree where he used to read as a teenager. I submitted the proper HOA architectural request form. 2 weeks later, it was approved with a signed letter from the board president. That's when Karen Whitmore entered my life. Karen was the HOA vice president, 55 years old, with platinum blonde hair she touched up every 3 weeks and a smile that never reached her eyes. She lived 4 houses down in the largest model on our street. People whispered that Karen hated not being board president. She'd run twice and lost both times. The first time I really noticed her attitude was at a neighborhood meeting, 3 weeks after I'd installed Michael's bench. She walked past my house with 2 other board members, and I overheard her through my open window. A bench in the front yard. How tacky. I felt my chest tighten, but I told myself to let it go. She didn't know what it meant to me. I should have recognized that moment for what it was, the first rumble before an avalanche. The first official letter arrived 6 weeks later. It was from the HOA, signed by Karen, violation notice, unauthorized landscape modification surrounding memorial structure. Fine, $50. Remove plantings within 14 days. I'd planted 4 rose bushes around the bench. Yellow roses. Michael's favorite. I called the HOA office. Karen answered. The bench was approved, I said, keeping my voice steady. I have the letter. The bench, yes. Not the roses. Section 4.7 prohibits resident-initiated landscape changes. They're just flowers, Karen. Rules are rules, Ellen. Click. I removed the roses. It felt like cutting away pieces of my heart, but I didn't want trouble. 2 months of peace followed. Then came letter number 2. Violation notice, memorial structure showing weathering inconsistent with community aesthetics. $100 fine. Refinish or remove within 30 days. The bench had developed a natural patina. It looked distinguished, not weathered. But I paid a carpenter $300 to revarnish it anyway. I saw Karen watching from her car as the carpenter worked. She was smiling. My neighbor, Rita, who'd lived here for 15 years, stopped by that evening with casserole. She's targeting you, Rita said quietly. She did this to the Johnsons before they sold their house. Karen hates when attention isn't on her. Everyone loved your bench, put photos of it online, called it the part of the neighborhood. She couldn't stand it. What can I do? Rita just shook her head. People have tried complaining to the board president, but he's barely involved anymore. Karen runs everything. The third incident happened on a Tuesday morning in October. I was at my doctor's appointment for my blood pressure, which had been climbing from the stress, when my phone rang. It was Rita. Ellen, you need to come home. Now. My hands trembled as I drove back. From 2 blocks away, I could see the crowd gathered in front of my house. The bench was destroyed. Not just damaged. Destroyed. Splintered wood scattered across my lawn. The brass plaque bent and scratched. Someone had taken a sledgehammer to it, repeatedly, violently. Rita stood in my driveway, her phone out. I got it on video. Karen showed up with 2 guys in a truck at 9 a.m. She told them it was an unauthorized structure removal, approved by the board. I stood there, staring at the broken pieces of oak. The wood Michael would have touched if he'd lived to help me build it himself. I didn't cry. Something else was building inside me now. I picked up the bent brass plaque. My thumb traced Michael's name, now scratched nearly illegible. She can't do this, I whispered. Even with HOA authority, she can't just destroy personal property. Rita touched my shoulder. I've already called the police. They're on their way. The officers arrived 20 minutes later. I showed them Rita's video. They watched Karen directing the workers, pointing at the bench, nodding as they swung the sledgehammer. That's destruction of property, ma'am, the younger officer said. You can press charges. But as I watched them write their report, something Rita said earlier clicked in my mind: Karen runs everything. She'd hidden behind HOA rules to harass me for months. She'd weaponized regulations meant to maintain property values, turning them into tools of cruelty. All because she was jealous of attention, because she needed control, because she could. The officers left. The neighbors dispersed. I sat on my porch steps, surrounded by splinters of oak. That's when I made my decision. Karen had spent months burying me in HOA regulations, finding every obscure rule to make my life miserable. She'd destroyed something irreplaceable, something sacred. So I was going to use her own weapon against her. If Karen wanted to live and die by HOA rules, then HOA rules would be exactly what destroyed her. That evening, I opened my laptop and downloaded every single HOA document, bylaws, architectural guidelines, violation records, board meeting minutes going back 5 years. I started reading. By midnight, I understood how Karen had gotten away with her behavior for so long. The board president, Tom, had health issues and barely participated. Karen essentially ran the HOA unchecked, deciding which violations to pursue and which to ignore. But that also meant she'd gotten sloppy. Over the next week, I did something I'd never done before: I became an expert in HOA regulations. I also became very interested in Karen's property. I drove past her house daily, taking photos. I requested public records from the county assessor. I talked to neighbors, casually asking questions about renovations and changes they'd noticed over the years. What I discovered was stunning. Karen had a converted garage apartment she'd been renting out for 4 years. Our HOA covenant explicitly prohibited rental properties, Section 8.3, crystal clear. She'd installed a backyard shed that exceeded the allowed 120 square feet by at least 40 square feet. No architectural approval on file. Her fence was 6 inches too tall, 6 feet 6 inches instead of the mandated 6-foot maximum. She'd painted her shutters a custom gray that wasn't on the approved color palette. And the most beautiful violation of all, she'd paved an extended driveway without permission, covering an additional 200 square feet of what should have been landscaping, directly violating the impervious surface ratio requirements. I documented everything with photos, measurements, and county records. Then I discovered something even better. Karen's rental apartment wasn't just an HOA violation. Because she'd never pulled permits or declared the rental income properly, it was potentially a county zoning violation and a tax issue. I spent one sleepless night double-checking everything, making sure my case was airtight. Then I prepared my presentation for the HOA board. The monthly meeting was in 6 days. The HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse on a Thursday evening. Attendance was usually sparse, maybe 8 homeowners and 3 board members. That night, 23 people showed up. Word had spread about what happened to Michael's bench. Rita had made sure of it. Karen sat at the board table, confident as ever, reviewing her agenda. She didn't even look at me when I walked in. During the open comment period, I stood. "I'd like to report multiple HOA violations," I said calmly. "Serious ones that have been ongoing for years." Karen's head snapped up. "This isn't the time for..." Section 12.4 allows any homeowner to report violations during open session, I interrupted, my voice steady. "I've prepared documentation." I handed folders to each board member. Tom, the president, opened his and started reading. His eyebrows rose. I projected photos on the clubhouse screen using my laptop. "Karen Whitmore's property contains 5 major violations," I began. "An unpermitted rental unit, an oversized shed, a fence exceeding height limits, unauthorized paint colors, and excessive impervious surface coverage." I walked them through each one, showing photos with measurements, county records, and the specific HOA sections being violated. The room was silent except for my voice. "Furthermore," I continued, "I've confirmed with county zoning that the rental apartment violates residential zoning codes. I've filed a formal complaint, and they'll be inspecting next week." Karen's face had gone from confident to pale to crimson. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "You can't. I also have documentation that you ordered the destruction of my son's memorial bench, which was fully approved by this board." I placed the approval letter on the table. "I have video evidence and a police report." Tom looked at Karen. "Is this true?" "It was weathered, it looked terrible, I was trying to. Did you have board authorization to remove it?" Karen's silence was answer enough. Tom cleared his throat. "Karen, given these violations and your abuse of authority, I'm calling for a vote to remove you from the board effective immediately." The vote was unanimous. 3 hands raised. Karen abstained. She walked out without a word. The county inspection happened 8 days later. Karen's rental apartment was deemed illegal. She was fined $15,000 and ordered to cease rental operations immediately, remove the shed, lower the fence, and restore the driveway to approved specifications. The total cost of compliance was estimated at $47,000. 2 months later, a "for sale" sign appeared in her yard. Rita told me Karen couldn't afford the fines and repairs. She'd been living beyond her means for years, supplementing her income with that illegal rental. Without it, she couldn't make her mortgage. She moved out in January. I never saw her again. The new HOA board, now led by Tom with actual active participation, issued a formal apology to me. They voted to approve a new memorial bench, which they helped fund as a community project. The new bench sits in the exact same spot. Same design, same brass plaque, but this time surrounded by a beautiful garden of yellow roses that 3 neighbors helped me plant. Michael's memorial is now an official community landmark, protected in the HOA bylaws. Sometimes I sit there in the early morning, watching the sunrise like Michael used to, and I feel something close to peace. The weight that had pressed on my chest for months, the anger, the helplessness, the grief compounded by cruelty, has lifted. Justice has a way of doing that. I learned something important through all of this: documentation is power. For months, I felt helpless against someone who wielded rules like weapons. But those same rules, when applied fairly and honestly, became my shield and my sword. Karen thought she was untouchable because she controlled the system. But systems only work when everyone follows the same rules. The moment she exempted herself while punishing others, she built the foundation of her own downfall. I don't take pleasure in what happened to her. I take comfort in knowing that my son's memory is now protected, that the community is safer from abuse of power, and that sometimes standing up for what's right actually works. If you've enjoyed this story of justice served, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep sharing these stories of regular people who refuse to be pushed around and found clever, legal ways to fight back. Your support means everything. Thanks for listening. And remember, keep your receipts, know your rights, and never let bullies convince you that cruelty is just following the rules.